Was their child alive or dead? They sent their second, third, or fourth grader to school in a South Texas elementary. An 18-year-old who had bought an AR-15 after he turned 18 then stormed into that school, slaughtering children and teachers until law enforcement finally took him out. So why? Why are we seeing more of these mass shootings in this country? Robb Elementary in Uvalde joins Santa Fe High School in Houston, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, and so many other schools in between over the past decade. Children die, parents are horrified, but what action should elected officials take?
I know some have suggested red flag laws. I'm open to that idea, but my concern is that due process isn't adequately addressed in a lot of the laws that are already on the books, and how you can do that.
It deals with it like an allegation.
Right. So yeah, so I'm afraid some people might lose their right to keep and bear arms without actual due process, just on the basis of an accusation, which could be credible, or it could be just somebody who's wanting to get somebody in a jam. So that's something, before I would seriously say, hey, yeah, I'm going to back a law like that, I would need to see, them address some of those issues.
What action do you want to see?
I mean, I want to see the constitutional amendment on the ballot in November voted down, for one, here in Iowa. That's an actionable thing that Iowans can do this year. But how many more times do we have to send our babies to school and not know if they'll come home? I think this may be a complex issue, but is there due process when our children are being murdered in schools? No. And so I think it's time we address the culture here around how do we weigh our gun rights given to us by the Second Amendment with the health and safety and concern of our communities and families.
So how do you weigh that?
I mean, clearly there needs to be some kind of agreement on background checks. We need more time between when people can purchase their weapons. We need more time between when people decide they want to purchase a weapon and they're actually able to bring that weapon home. Certainly there is a right to have guns in this country, but that has been clearly taken too far.
Shane, when you talk about background checks, universally that's popular with the public, right? 90%.
Right.
Depending on their specifics.
And there are background checks, but
not at private gun.
Not in private, but whenever you're dealing with a federally qualified dealer, there's background checks, and most of the gun purchases are made that way. And I don't know a practical way you could do a background check for somebody, say, person to person, a friend selling to another friend. Here's the deal. Criminals break the law. And if somebody wants to purchase a weapon, they're going to find a way to purchase a weapon, whether or not we have a background check. And a lot of the concern with those pushing for universal background checks are also, that's just a couple steps from doing a database as well, which is something that I know a lot of gun advocates are against. I think there are things we could do we could address, first of all, how we handle people who are making threats when we see that. Talk about how we can intervene before things happen. With the case of Buffalo, I mean, obviously this young man was disturbed and made several things that there could have been different attempts to intervene in that situation before it took place. We can talk about how we protect kids at school. I'm not school. I know I don't necessarily want to increase policing presence at school, because the libertarian in me says, I don't want the police there to keep an eye and trying to arrest kids. But I think it's important that, we've got security in courthouses, we've got security in a lot of different public buildings. Why not more armed security at school?
I'm wondering why should Iowans not be cynical about this in that we will just talk about this until the next one, and then until the next one, until the next one? Like Congress never does anything, ever, other than maybe the Brady bill way back,
Right.
and then when the Brady bill disappeared. And so is this just not a thing Congress should even be part of? Is there some other responsibility, or are we going to have to just accept that bad people do bad things, or disturbed people do bad things?
Well, as a Christian, I believe we live in a sinful, broken world, and I think we're going to have instances like that, whether they use a gun,
But
whether
we're
they
having
use a
way
knife.
more of these the last
Right.
decade for sure.
Right, and I think we definitely we have a culture of violence, in the United States, and it's not just guns. It's just any violence that it seems like we've been desensitized, and I don't think there's any silver bullet solution that's going to adequately address this problem. It's a problem of the human heart, and it's a problem with mental illness, and I don't think public policy is going to necessarily change any of that.
But something has made this worse, Jamie.
It has, and it's that it's very easy to get a gun in the United States of America. And, bad people do bad things, but at the same time, that handful of bad people have ruined it for the rest of us, right? And that means that we need to put some policy measures in place to make it harder for instances like this to happen. I think that, there was a large movement from the right to prevent masks to come into schools, to prevent books from being in schools. And where is that outrage when children die from gun violence? Why aren't we having a conversation about protecting our kids from gun violence when it seems very easy to have a conversation about wearing a mask when there's a global pandemic that's killing people, over 1 million Americans? But somehow it becomes a very complex issue, and we have to use a lot of rhetoric when it comes to gun rights. But children are dying. Innocent people are dying. People are going to the grocery store to pick up milk and not coming home. So policy needs to address this. And it is, it's one thing to say that we live in a broken world, but our elected officials are here to help put measures in place so that that world is a little bit less broken. And how do we prevent ourselves from being cynical? Frankly, I don't believe that there's an answer to this right now.
New York has some of the strictest gun control laws on the books. It didn't prevent that mass shooting. I honestly don't think gun control is the solution here. Yeah, as far as I'm outraged, I don't want to see children. I was horrified at what happened yesterday. Nobody wants to see 19 children in an elementary school shot dead. But we can't just approach this, emotionally. We have to think about individual rights. We have to think about what's actually going to be effective. Otherwise, we're just coming up with policies that aren't going to really address the heart of the problem. It's going to just, it's getting around the edges, and it may restrict freedom, but it's not actually going to do anything.
But in the end here, nothing happens and nothing ever does happen.
Right.
And it's
that is
obviously complex for a million reasons, but
right.
I think we keep coming back to the same thing though, right?
And it's because
we could have done this after each previous
and
mass
it's
shooting.
because we have nobody, you got both sides that are alienated.
Don't do anything and get rid of all guns.
And I surely there are bipartisan solutions out there, and perhaps background. I would have to see more what a background check bill would actually look like, proposal, before I would say, hey, yeah, let's do that. I'm certainly open to the conversation, but also we need to talk about how we address mental illness, how we address people who are making threats and showing signs and symptoms, when there could be interventions had that are just ignored, or if they fall through the cracks.
Obviously, the country's not going to get rid of all of its guns here, but what are the solutions? Will anybody actually do anything about this? You heard Shane talk about the red flag laws. What about when you're 18, is that too young to legally buy a gun? Should they ban all assault weapons? Should there be more money for mental health funding and services? Should they do those universal background checks? Should they arm teachers in classrooms? Should there be armed police at the school entrances? Should they limit the entrances before you can get into schools and get out of schools? What about the faith-based community organizations, the nonprofits? Do they have any ideas here? What about big tech? Is there a responsibility to help detect messages, these threats that could foreshadow some kind of major malicious act? Force big tech to have to report these, get authorities involved, and then everybody here. What kind of role does everybody have in reporting somebody who's made some kind of a threat here? Now we wait to see if politicians are going to do anything here. You're hearing a lot of talk about some ideas, but we've seen in the past that nothing really happens. So will this be a change? Will something happen this time? Are they really going to do something? Whatever they believe will help, any of these ideas or something else. We have found out that thoughts and prayers have not been enough in the case of the past. We will see if this is what we will get, is more thoughts and prayers when the next one of these happens somewhere in our country. All right, let's see how much this issue drives voters in the upcoming election. But up next, we want to talk about a different issue that could be even bigger this year than in the past.